Welcome to Maxability. To unfold different layers of knowledge, stay tuned with us till the end of the video.
Let's get started. So we are at 9:1. Let me quickly introduce Rob and all yours. So Rob is the senior product manager at Adobe for the Document Cloud, and he has decades of experience in accessibility. Before Adobe, he is in Microsoft, and he is also part of many working groups and other initiatives throughout the globe in the space of accessibility. This is definitely an honor for us to have him here for PDF accessibility, being him the product manager for accessibility on the Documentation Cloud. Thank you very much for your time and effort for this, Rob. Uh, and it's all you. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Rakesh. And the honor is all mine. I appreciate being invited. So today I'm going to kind of fly through some stuff to get you started on PDF accessibility. And in that process, we'll also look at some of the new functionality that Acrobat Pro DC has to make it easier for you. What I actually like to do in this presentation is actually start at the end and then come back to the beginning. So what I would like to just mention is there are a number of resources available on PDF accessibility, some of which I have created. And I do periodically do webinars on the slide here. And Rakesh, will the slides come out to folks afterwards? So we'll figure out a way to make sure you get the slides. There is a link here for my previous webinar recordings where I have gone through the basics, complex tables, scanned documents, forms. So if you want more information after this session, that's a great place to look. You can also always email me. My email is in the contacts at the end there. All right, so let's get started. So what I really want to talk today about is how do we maximize our workflow in creating digital documents to make sure that they are accessible, and in particular, when you get to the state of having a PDF document. So we're going to talk just briefly about compliance and then move into talking a little bit about document design. And then at that point, we will go into actual techniques on how to use Acrobat and use the tools in Acrobat to create accessible PDF documents. So I always like to start by talking about disability. And I imagine everyone on this call is familiar with this. But you know, a few years back, the World Health Organization sort of redefined disability. And yes, it is a medical condition, but it is more than that. It really is an umbrella and a term that covers activity limitations and participation restrictions, as well as impairments. So when we think about that, we then think about how do we address accessibility of documents, particularly for people with disabilities. Now, this flow I have here is a little bit US-centric, but it really is intended to be more of an example, because this is true throughout most of the world today. Many countries, in fact, most countries, because of a UN convention called the Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities, have some kind of disability law in place. And similar to in the United States, the Americans with Disabilities Act, or in the UK, the Disability Discrimination Act, there are laws, you know, all around the world. And essentially, they don't really help us a whole lot in understanding how to make something accessible, but they give us a little bit of weight of the law that people with disabilities need equal access. So Secondarily to that, again, most countries around the world have some kind of law that is more specific about, well, how do you address this? What are the standards? What are the requirements? In the United States, there's a law called Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act. Elsewhere in the world, there are many other laws of a similar nature. The Act in Ontario, there are laws in India, there are laws, in China and Japan and countries everywhere that essentially say that, you need to make your content accessible, and particularly content that is posted on the web. That's great, but then that doesn't really tell us what do we need to do. And so when we look at that, most of these laws then point to WCAG, or the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. Some of them are still pointing to 2.0, some point to 2.1. So you kind of need to think about that. But in our worldview at Adobe, we just focus on 2.1 regardless. That gives you the best meaning of the standards. And really, we look to WCAG to tell us what the requirements are for content. But WCAG tells us the what, but not so much the how when it comes to PDF documents. And so to understand how to make PDF documents accessible, we then look to the ISO standard 14289, also known as PDF UA or PDF Universal Access. This gives us the specific information, and we'll talk about this a little bit more, the specific information about how to structure a PDF document. At the end of the day, compliance is really only the beginning. We really are talking about how do we make things usable for everyone. So a little deeper dive into PDF UA. PDF UA is a subset of the ISO standard that covers all of PDF that is hundreds of pages long. PDF UA is much more manageable. And the goal there is to make sure that we know how to create a PDF document that will expose the text and the structure and the organization of the content for assistive technologies. So some of the things that we need to focus on there is knowing what the standard requires, but also knowing what your own organization may require. Because in some cases, the standard is not concrete. Instead of telling you you must do something or you shall do it, it says you may. And so you actually have some choices there. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the source document. So the challenge with the source document is, number one, not all source documents can be made fully accessible. And so you really need to know what application you're using to create your document. In most cases, I would say still over 99% of the cases, people don't create a PDF raw. What they've done is they've created another document in Word, in Google Docs, in InDesign, in many other document creation engines, and then converted it to a PDF. Not all of these convert well to an accessible PDF. So even if you can make a document accessible, you may not be able to convert it into an accessible PDF easily. And it kind of depends upon the stage in which you are at in your workflow. Sometimes you have the source document, sometimes you don't. Sometimes you may have a scanned document. Sometimes you may have a PDF that someone else converted. So you don't really know where you are, but in all cases you need to go to a tool that will allow you to make a PDF document accessible. And of course, since I work for Adobe, our preferred tool is Acrobat Pro DC. I'll take a moment to mention that you'll hear me constantly refer to Acrobat Pro DC. That is the latest version. That is our subscription version. And I won't get into the politics of whether the subscription model is better or worse. Most technology companies are going to that, but I do want you to know that when you are doing accessibility in particular, the most current version of a product is the most important and has the most tools for you to make a document accessible, or anything else for that matter. And that is true with Acrobat Pro DC. Our subscription version, we are updating on a quarterly basis, and we are trying to improve not only the accessibility of the product, but also the workflow, making it easier for you to create accessible PDF documents. So a typical workflow would be to take the original document, and actually this is more of a typical workflow within a business where maybe you are signing a document. And a lot of times what people will do is they will create a digital version of that document in Word, for example. They'll convert it to a PDF. They may make that PDF fully accessible. Then they will print it out. Then they will sign it. Then they will scan it back in. Then they have to open it in Acrobat and run text recognition or some other text recognition engine, and then they have to make the PDF accessible again. This is fraught with a whole lot of problems. So it is better to have a digital flow as much as possible. So let's talk a little bit more about the source document. The one thing that I always tell people to make sure that they remember forever and always is the source document is supreme. If you have an inaccessible source document, you will have an inaccessible PDF. There is no magic button. Garbage in, garbage out has never been more true than when it comes to converting from a source document to a PDF. So you want to make sure that A, your source document authors know how to create an accessible document in that product. Most people I know, including many I work with in the accessibility community, don't actually know how to fully make a Word document accessible. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. Does the authoring tool allow you to create an accessible document? Not all of them do. Word has done a lot of work and is a great tool for that. It is almost always easier to make the source document accessible and then convert it to a PDF. And if you have done all the work correctly, particularly in Word, and you convert it, and it is a basic text document, you will now have a 100% accessible PDF. So let's talk about Word for just a minute. I don't want to spend too much time, but make sure you're using styles, heading styles, paragraph styles, lists. Make sure you've created alt text. There's a new feature in Word that allows you to mark alt text as decorative, or images as decorative. Currently, that doesn't get respected on conversion to a PDF, but we're working on that. Make sure you're using the table design tool that allows you to indicate header rows, which would be the column headers, and first column, which would be the row headers. And always run the accessibility checker. Just briefly, I've got a screenshot here of the table tools. And under the design tool, there is a header row and there is a first column. And if you check both of those, assuming you have column and row headers, it will come across then as tagged as correctly as a table with the correct header cells. And then the accessibility checker, they've actually made it easier to get to. In the past, you had to go to File and then go to Check for Issues and then select Check Accessibility. You can actually, in Word, just go to Review, and right in there, it has the accessibility checker as well. All right, so that's a nice little overview. I could spend more time. I spend as much as 2 days at a time in doing classes, hands-on classes teaching this. So this is going to be a pretty quick little introduction. So Fixing tags in a document. You've got your PDF. Maybe it came across pretty well from Word. Maybe that Word document was actually made to be accessible. Maybe it didn't. Maybe you got it from somewhere else, or someone printed it to convert it, in which case it was untagged. And I'll talk about tags in just a second. So, actually, I'll talk about that right now. Fixing tags is really what making an accessible PDF is all about. We'll actually look at this and see this, but there is something called the structure tree or the tag tree, which indicates these tags that tell assistive technologies what the structure is all about. Is it a heading? Is it a table? Is it a list? Is it a paragraph? All of that information is essential for an assistive technology to actually understand and help the user to understand the document. There are some things, no matter what you do in the source document, there are some things that I always check. The first thing is tables. The more complex a table is, the more work that you have to do manually to make that table accessible. I also check figures, because people don't always create alt text. And even when they do, they don't really create good alt text. And so I want to check that and make sure that the figures that need alt text actually have alt text, and the figures that don't need to be there for comprehension are artifacted, or in a sense are removed from the tag tree. And then lists. Lists are something else that, depending upon the complexity of the list or how it was created, may or may not be tagged correctly for accessibility. Now, there are some unique things to think about. And we will not go into any of these in this session, but I do have the recordings on these. Scan documents. Scan documents require an entirely different approach and extra work. Role mapping. If someone has created custom tags, PDF UA is very, very strict on the tag formatting. A heading is a capital H with a number. It is not the word heading. It is not a lowercase h. Anything that does not fit strictly within the definition, the defined format for a tag, makes it a custom tag, and you would have to map that. We won't talk about that either. Links. Links have other issues, but if you have created your links correctly in your Word document and you've converted it over using one of the tools to convert to a PDF that gives you a tagged PDF, then you are in good shape with links. And then form fields. Form fields are in and of themselves a whole day worth of learning. I will mention that in fixing an inaccessible PDF, so you have some options here. And I'm actually going to go into a Word document. And let's take a look at this for a moment. So I mentioned converting from a Word document or another document into a PDF. Word gives you one of the best flows from a source document to an accessible PDF. And you have a couple of ways you can do that. When you have Acrobat installed on your machine with Office, up in the ribbon, typically very far to the right of the ribbon, will be a tab that says Acrobat. And when we click on that, we will open the Acrobat ribbon, and there is a tool in there for Create PDF. This will create a tagged PDF using the structure that you gave in the Word document, the headings, the lists, the paragraphs, all that information, to create an appropriately tagged PDF. I will note one thing in preferences, and we all like to look at our preferences. Down at the bottom here, you'll notice there is a checkbox. It's kind of indented that says Enable Advanced Tagging. Advanced always sounds better, but in this case, it is not. If you check that, you will get a bunch of garbage tags that you don't want. So I always recommend people don't check that. So we're going to exit out of that, and I want to go back up to the ribbon, and we're going to select the file selection. And you will notice if you go to Save As in Word, not Save as Adobe PDF. Save as Adobe PDF is the same thing as using the Acrobat tool. But if you use Word Save As, and in the drop-down for the document type, you select PDF, this will also give you a fully tagged PDF. The difference is this is Microsoft's interpretation of the standard as opposed to Adobe's interpretation. And we are pretty close to being exactly the same, but there are some differences. And so you might want to play with those and figure out which one is going to give you the best results. All right, so let's get to work. I've already mentioned, things that I look at: tables, figures, artifacts, lists. So let's take a look at actually working on a document. So let's look at headings first. Now, headings in PDF are a little bit unique from headings in HTML or on a web page. In HTML, the rule is you can only have one H1 on a page. In PDF, that's not true. You can have multiple H1s. The rule for PDF, however, is that they must be in the right hierarchical order. So if I go over here on the left side of my Acrobat, you'll notice a navigation pane over here, and there are a bunch of icons. And if the icons are not showing up for you, if you're into Acrobat and you're not seeing the luggage tag and the Z order and the content view icons, they need to be added. And you can look at my basics webinar and see that. So I won't go through that here. But we're going to open the tag icon and the tag tree. Now, one of the things to note that the PDF UA standard says is the tag tree must be in the logical reading order. So because of that, I live almost exclusively in the tag tree. You can go to the order panel, you can go to the content panel, but the reality is it is sometimes challenging to get the order panel and the tag tree to harmonize. So I focus on the tag tree. Assistive technologies today are looking to the tag tree for the logical reading order. If you don't have a tag document, that's when they look at the order panel. But we're making this accessible by having a tag document, so the order panel becomes less important. So let's, I see that I pulled up the wrong document here. So I'm going to do a quick little fix here to get this back to the state that I wanted it to be in. And then I'll explain to you what I've done. All right, so when we look at the tag tree here, when I brought it over originally from Word, we'll notice that the very first heading is an H4. Well, why? Well, that's because the person creating this in Word was using styles for visual appeal and not to actually structure their document correctly. And they looked at the H4 style and they went, oh, that's kind of cool. It's got italics and I like that. And so I'm going to use that as my H1. Well, because they used the H4, and that's what Word calls it, we're going to tag it as an H4. Easy to fix. We select it, and we know it's selected because it has a blue focus indicator. And then I can click on that and go into the actual tag itself. I can also use F2 to go into the edit mode for that tag. And all I have to do is change that 4 to a 1. And now it will read as an H1 for assistive technology. Note, it did not change the visual look of the document. The purpose of PDF documents is fidelity of their visual layout. So what we're doing in making it accessible is we're trying to massage things in the tag tree to make it more understandable. So we do the same thing in the H5. Now let's say maybe that wasn't an H5, maybe it wasn't a heading tag at all, it was some other kind of tag, and I don't know the format for a heading tag. I can put my focus there and I can right click, I can go down to properties, which are at the bottom of the context menu, and I can select the type drop down, and then I can just scroll and find, oh, I want that to be a heading level 2. And you'll notice that as soon as I've done that, over in the tag tree, it turned it to an H2. So if you don't know the formatting, let's say you were going to do a list tag, and you don't know that a list tag is a capital L, if you select it in the drop down, it will automatically make that tag correct for you. So this is the simple part of just changing tags. They're already there, and you just want them to be something different. That's easy. All right, let's close out of that. And let's go back, and let's go into the next document we're going to spend most of the rest of the time in. And I have about 15 minutes to fly through some stuff here. So I want to teach you about adding tags to the tag tree. So if you look at the tag tree, and if I select the very topmost tag, the word tags at the top is not a tag. It doesn't have angle brackets around it. It's actually the root of the tag tree. So if I select the topmost tag that has the word section or sect, S-E-C-T, with angle brackets, you'll notice that I get this bright pink outline around each of the content elements that have a tag. So I know that these are tagged. And I can start arrowing down my tag tree, and I can see that my first one is H1, and that looks like a heading 1. I have a paragraph tag that looks like a paragraph. I have an H2. I have another paragraph. I have an H3 that says list of Canadian provinces by population. And then under that, I have a list of Canadian provinces. But they're not tagged as a list because the person who created this in Word didn't use list styles. And so they came across as P tags. So I need to fix that. So I need to add a new tag. I need to add my list tag. Tags, when you add a new tag, are always added below the tag that has focus. So I put my focus on the H3. I right click. You can also go to the drop down to the left of the eye with the circle. I tend to be a keyboard user, so I'm going to right click on my keyboard. And I am going to say new tag, and I want it to be a list tag. I'm going to scroll down the drop down for list, and I'm going to select it. You don't need a title for your tags. They can be helpful in organizing your tag tree, but they're irrelevant to the assistive technology or the end user. So I'm going to say OK. And you'll notice two things happened. I got an L tag, which is blank because there is no expand collapse to the left of it. And my focus went back up to the very top of the tag tree. I'm working on fixing that so it'll actually stay on that L tag. So now one of the things that is new, prior to about a year ago, you would have to go in and manually change every single one of these P tags to a list item, capital L, capital I tag, and then move them under the L tag as a child. You don't have to do that anymore. I can hold down my shift key and use my down arrow. And as I'm selecting the P tags, I'm also sort of watching the document and those pink boxes to make sure that I get all of the correct content. I can right click at this point, and I've selected them all, go down to properties, and I'm on the tag tab, and I'm going to go to the type, and I'm going to select list item. And you'll notice that as soon as I did that, all the P tags that I selected turned into LIs. So I can close that. Now, those are all still selected. So all I have to do now is either drag and drop them under the L tag as a child or cut and paste. I'm not competent in dragging and dropping. I just can't get things to go where I want them to, so I always cut and paste. So again, I'm going to right click, and I'm going to cut, and I'm going to go to my L tag, and I'm going to right click, and I'm going to paste it as a child. So now I have my L tag for my list with all of my LI children, which are the list items which contain that content. Now, the standard also allows for a label, LBL, or a list body or L body tag. The label would be the bullet or the number. In this case, this one doesn't have any bullets or numbers. And the L body is the actual content or text that is in that list. The standard doesn't require that you do that. You can have just an LI and you are perfectly fine. In my experience, and others may have a different experience, but in my experience, a screen reader is going to read it the same way whether you have the label and the L body or not. So now we've created a list. Pretty simple. All right, one of the other things that people tend to do, and I'm going to collapse that, and I'm going to keep arrowing down my tag tree and go to the artifacts section. Back in the old days when I learned to type on a manual typewriter, before there were computers, I'm dating myself, the only way to get a space between paragraphs was to do a carriage return. And a lot of people still do that. They don't actually format it. Well, that can be annoying, and sometimes it can be confusing for people with assistive technologies because it'll get read as blank. So as we go through this document, it would read the paragraph according to PDF UA ISO standard, blah, 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 blank. Additionally, because they are blank, one common error in the Word document, blank, and it will go on through. Not the end of the world, but annoying. Where it gets confusing is when people use a whole bunch of blank lines to format pages. And so you get down to the end of a page and it goes blank, 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 blank. To the assistive technology user, they might think, well, that might be the end of the document, and it can be confusing. So we want to get rid of those. So we're going to go into the reading order tool. Now, those of you who've been doing this a long time may go to, or have gone to the order panel, gone up to the drop down, and select Show Reading Order Panel. It used to be called the Touch-Up Reading Order Panel. We dropped the word Touch-Up. And you would bring up this order panel that has a whole bunch of buttons on it and other stuff. You don't have to do that anymore. As I said, I live in the tag tree. So I can select that very first blank space. I can right-click, and you will find with a hotkey the option for reading order in the context menu with the hotkey of X. And that brings up my reading order panel. So now I can select. One of the reasons I like to select the tag first is I can then see the pink box around what I need to get rid of. And I select that number 18, and I go over to background artifact, and I click that. You'll notice the 18 moved down to the paragraph, and if we go back to our tag tree, that is now gone. This is the only method of artifacting that will actually clean up the tag tree automatically for you. So it saves you time to do it this way. Now, I did one single one, but you don't have to do that. You can actually go through a document, and I see that 19 is blank, and I can hold down the control key and I can select 21, it's blank, and I can select 23 because it's blank, and I can go over to the order tool and I can select background artifact, and I did something wrong. Let's try that again. And now they're all gone. So a great way to easily get rid of content that you don't want, like blank lines, like decorative images. I'm going to skip down to tables. So let's talk a little bit about tables. Let me see if I can get rid of that. There we go. All right. Now remember, I showed you very briefly in Word that you can check boxes to show that there is a column header or row headers. In the old days, you used to select repeat header. Now that actually is used just for the function of repeating a header cell over a table or for a table that goes over multiple pages. So if I go to the table, now again, in the old days of Acrobat, which means like a year ago, I would have to go to the Z order panel, go up to the drop down, select show reading order panel, and when I first started, I swear there was like a 4-pixel square space to the left of the word table for the table in the document that you had to find to click on in order to get the table editor button to be active so that you could open the table editor. Wow, that's a lot of steps. I don't have to do that anymore. Again, if I'm in the tag tree, I select the table tag, I right click, I have a keyboard, a hotkey of Q, or I can select table editor in the context menu. And now I'm in my table editor. And you will notice colors. You can go in and you can set the colors to indicate what you want. You can also set for it to show TH and TD for the header and data cells. I don't have those on right now because they also tend to cover up some of the text that I want to be able to see. So once I've done that, I will need to check my header cells. So I'm going to select the very first one that says color, and just by clicking on it, and I'm going to right click there to bring up the context menu, and I'm going to go into table cell properties. I want to make sure that it says that it is a header cell, which it will do automatically if you've checked those boxes in Word for table design. And I need to make sure that the scope is set. So in this case, it is a column header, so I need to set the scope as column. Today, regardless of how you convert a source document into a PDF, you will always have to go in and set your scope for all your header cells. Working on fixing that, at least for the conversion from Word. If you do not set that, and you were, for example, in the bottom rightmost data cell that has the number 7, and you had an assistive technology and you asked it to indicate what header cells are associated with that data cell, it would say trucks, color, ruby red, midnight black, triple yellow. Because I did not indicate that ruby red, midnight black, and triple yellow are row headers. If I were to go in, and I can bulk select, again by holding down the Shift key, you cannot use your arrow to select, that will navigate the document. I can select all 3 of those. I can right click, go into table cell properties, change my scope to row, say OK. I always like to go back to one like in the middle there and make sure I got it. I did. Now that I've done that, and if I'm in this data cell 7, the header cells associated will be trucks, color, and triple yellow. Assistive technologies assume if scope is not set that all header cells are column headers. So it's very important to set that scope. All right, let's go down to a slightly more complex table. And again, I'm going to select the tag, the table tag, and I know I've selected it because I have those pink boxes around everything. I'm going to right click, and I'm going to hit the letter Q to open up my table editor, and now I'm in my table. Now this one's a little more complex. Anytime you have merged header cells, or you have nested header cells, you're going to have to do some additional work besides the work that we already know you have to do to set scope. So I'm going to select that table cell, the header cell that says first quarter 2015. I'm going to right click. I'm going to go to table cell properties, and we'll notice that scope needs to be set. I'm going to say column. And then I need to set how many columns that header spans. It spans 3, January, February, and March. So I'm going to set the column span to 3. Sort of a quick little tip here. You want to make sure that your scope always matches your span. So if the scope is column, the row span should be 1. The only time you're going to mess with a row span and a column span is when you have a header that is for both column and row. So I'm going to set that to column. You're going to get a message that says you're changing the attribute that may make this table difficult to understand. In the old days, this was true. We didn't like merged cells in tables, but assistive technologies have gotten much smarter, and it really is not the problem that it used to be. So I'm going to say yes, and you'll notice the color changed on that. Unfortunately, the only way I know that I've set the header, or I have merged the header cells is by color at this point. We're working on fixing that also, because as you all probably know, that fails one of the standards. One of the criterion in the standard. Can't use color alone. So again, I can go and I can hold down my shift key and I can select all 3 of those, go to my table cell properties, set my scope as column, go to column span, make that 3. I'll get that message again. You'll get it every time, and it'll set that. Then I need to go down and I need to select January through December and make those header cells also. I'll just do January, again, table cell properties, change it from a data cell to a header cell, and it's a column header, and you're good to go. And we need to make sure we go in and change the scope on the other ones as well. The last thing I want to show you is figures. So setting alt text in figures. You can always go to a figure and right click, go into properties in the context menu, and find the alt text box, and it'll say alternate text, and set the alternate text there. However, over here on the right, we have a toolbar, and under the accessibility tools, there is a tool that says set alternate text. It will come up and say, we will detect all the figures, you know, and you can dismiss this so it never shows again. I need to leave it because I'm showing people stuff. And I'll say, okay. And I will now get a dialog open that says set alternate text. It will tell me what image I'm on, of how many images, and it will give me the chance to set the alternate text. Up at the top, there are forward and back arrows that are really, really small. Don't hit save and close, or you've gone out of the tool and you'll have to go back in, so you don't want to hit that till the very end. And there is a checkbox here that would be really cool if it actually functioned correctly, which says decorative figure. In my perfect world, I would check that and it would automatically artifact that image in the way that we went through and artifacted those blank lines, and it would remove it from the tag tree. That doesn't work yet correctly, so don't check that box. You'll have to go in and manually artifact. But you can set your alt text. This is on an image of my dog. But whatever you want, and then go to the next one, and then I have an image. I have the alt text already in there. Black bear standing in our driveway on a sunny afternoon. Click the arrow, it takes me to the next image. And so I can quickly go through all of my images in my document and check to make sure that they have appropriate alt text. So I'd like to stop at this point and open it up for questions. We have about 15 minutes left, and I've kind of flown through a bunch of stuff, and I am sure there are questions.
We kept the rice, plain rice. Only plain rice is good for what?
Hey Rob, thanks for a wonderful session. There are a couple of questions that people have asked during the session. The one is from CD, who asks if there is any accessibility checker available in InDesign.
Ah, great question. No, there is not an I don't believe so. I'm not quite the expert in InDesign that I need to be, but I don't believe there is one. I will just highlight the fact that since it came up, that there is an accessibility checker. It's called Full Check. I don't quite know why it's not called accessibility checker. And that's in the accessibility tool also in Acrobat, but not in InDesign at this point. Good feature requests though. And that is one thing I will mention just to follow up on that a little bit more. I love to get email from folks where they're having problems, where they want things fixed in the product, where they want changes. So certainly feel free to send me email with your challenging issues. All right, Rakesh, you mentioned another question.
Yeah, the other questions are about if your presentation is available to share, and if you can put the link of your other videos in the chat.
The link of my what? I'm sorry?
The other videos of your trainings.
Oh, yes. Okay, let me put that in the chat. Let me find that here. Actually, I'll just do it this way. Go away. There we go. All right. Oops. Oh, seriously? There we go. All right, so I've sent the link to my video recordings of the webinars that I did. It has the recordings of those, plus all the exercises that I do in those, plus all the fixed documents or the solutions. So you're able to go through and practice and then check your work against the document that I have that I have created. I found that when I learned, this was a really effective way. It took me about 6 weeks to learn, kind of the basics of getting through stuff. And once I learned, I sort of thought, great, I'm an expert now. And I put it aside and I went back a couple months later and didn't remember anything. So feel free to take notes. Feel free to share these videos. These are public. You can copy them to your own servers in your own businesses. You can do whatever you want with those. These are yours to use as a resource.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. So one other question that we had from Venkatesh is that in the tag PDF, the tags are shown visually, but not available in the tag panel in some documents. So any solution for that?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Venkatesh, if you can unmute and ask the question for more clarity.
Yeah, hi Rob. When we are creating tags, so visually we can able to see what content is tagged, right? But when I open the tags panel, the tags are not there. Even though I am trying to tag the content multiple times, visually it is showing that it was highlighted that the text is tagged. But when I going through the tags panel, the tags are still not available. I found this kind of issue for 3 to 4 PDFs. So is there any solution for that?
I don't know. That's a new one for me. So are you using the reading order tool to create your tags?
Yes.
Okay. Can you send me a document where you're seeing that, and let me see if I can figure it out. We may need to, I'm happy to do something offline and maybe walk through your workflow to kind of see where that's, I've not seen that before, so that's a new one for me. I'll be interested in exploring that further with you.
Okay, Rob. Actually, I mean, I worked on remediation before 6 months, so I'm not sure whether I'm having the document with me or not. If I have the document, I will share with you. And I also have one more additional doubt. So when I'm creating tags, automatically the text becomes invisible.
What?
So is there any
Uh,
solution for that?
You are, that sounds like you are creating a document from, you're taking a document from InDesign to PDF? Is that,
No, I
no?
have a PDF document which is available from online. I downloaded it and I tried to
Okay,
remediate with Acrobat.
so if things become invisible, that is probably because it was created in InDesign using layers. And you can go into the content panel and, in a sense, flatten that document so that everything is at the same layer. There really isn't any reason to make layers. Designers like to do that when they're in InDesign, but it doesn't really add anything, and so getting rid of them doesn't take anything away from the document. But that's what's happening is you're tagging something on a layer that is over another layer, and so then that layer disappears.
Thanks, Rob. So
Sure.
there's one other question that talks about fillable PDFs. If we have any resources to talk about fillable PDFs.
So a little more context on that too. Are we talking about creating a PDF that has form fields that need to be filled out and creating those form fields? Is that what the question is?
Correct.
Okay, so yes. So again, I did 2 webinars on that, showing 2 different approaches to creating those. So you can go and look at those webinars and walk through the process there. I will tell you that there is no simple way to create an accessible PDF form. There is a lot of manual work. So regardless of what you did in the source document, you're going to have to go in and either have Acrobat. We have a tool called Prepare Form, and either have Acrobat in the Prepare Form tool auto-detect the form fields, which can be 50 to 100% accurate. Or you can go in and you can manually create the form fields, and then you, regardless of how you do this, you're going to have to do some manual work in the tag tree as well to make sure that the form tags are in the correct place in the logical reading order in the tag tree and are created correctly. Form tags are just like link tags. They must have an object reference or an OBJR as part of them, or it is not a valid form tag. I can quickly, maybe, just to give you a quick look. So you can do forms on either a tagged or an untagged PDF. And when you have a correctly done PDF for accessibility that's a form, you would have the visible label as a P tag, and under that you would have your form tag that would then have the OBJR for that form field. Any other questions?
Actually, I've got one. I don't know if I'm coming through or not.
You are.
Okay, perfect. Recently on the WebAIM listserv, an issue has come up around creating proper tables of contents, and none of the plugins like the Acrobat or the Word Save As or the others, they don't all seem to do it the same way, and invariably it means you end up having to go in afterwards and make corrections to make them work properly. Any comments or thoughts on that?
Sure, I always have a comment. I have lots of opinions. So that is all an extremely valid statement. One of the things that does happen with table of contents is it is inconsistent, regardless of the conversion tool you use, as to how they come across to the PDF. There are some I have found typically, if I am using the default table of contents in Word, it will come across tagged correctly in the PDF, but I would not say that I am 100% confident in that. And so you're absolutely right. Frequently you do have to go in and massage table of contents. One of the gotchas I've seen that drives me crazy, and I've not found a perfect solution to, is when you have references in your table of contents to page numbers that are greater than single character page numbers, and for some reason it wants to tag each of those as separate links. And the only thing I've been able to do is just get rid of one of them and just tag the one, and then go into the actual text and make it the number that it should be. So yes, table of contents are, I need to do a webinar on table of contents. That's a really good idea. And there's a lot that we need to do to fix that. I was actually just going through that yesterday and looking at issues in tagging, and table of contents is one of those. So I will mention again, Rakesh, I'm assuming we can send out this deck to the folks who registered. Is that a true statement?
Yes, Rob, we can do that.
Okay, great. So then at the very end of the deck, you will see resources. You'll see the link to where we will post webinars when I'm going to do other ones for Acrobat, and plus other contact information and other links and resources that you may find useful.
Yep. Thank you very much, Rob, for your time. And we are just 1 minute up. And this is really a great honor for us to have you here, and look forward for the advanced session soon.
Well, great. Thank you so very much. And again, as I said, it was an honor to be able to participate. So everyone have a wonderful beginning or end of their day.
Thank you for watching and being with us. Please like and share the video. Don't forget to click on the bell icon. And also, for more updates, subscribe the channel.